Hello my sexy faggots. And welcome back to my swell goes to adventure through Drew Pickles the Dark's childhood hometown, that being Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts. When last we left off, I made some stops in the western neighborhoods of Buzzards Bay, but now I have just reached the outskirts of Drew Pickles the Dark's neighborhood, so we will be stopping by his house, as well as some other houses which include some family, some asshole neighbors, some friends, among other such things. Well, without further ado, let's get to this. Anyway, when last we left off I was at the intersection of Puritan Road and Alderberry Road, and since the roads are grid-like a little, I will do a little zigzagging. So I will turn onto Alderberry Road and head down it. I will take a look at the first house in the right, which a three-legged dog used to live at. Drew Pickles the Dark isn't exactly sure how it lost one of its legs, he just remembers seeing it out front. But anyway, I must be moving on, so I will just use the basketball hoop in this image as a dildo like bag that lost well before moving on. The next house I will stop will be the one of the guy who set up a Grim Reaper thing sitting in a chair in his front yard during October as a decoration, so all the neighborhood kids could see. Then on Halloween night he would wear the costume and sit in the chair, then when trick-or-treating kids came by he would get up and scare the piss and shit out of them. The idea of wearing my super sexy Halloween costume then getting scared and shitting and pissing in it will make me so horny I will proceed to rub one out like a bag that lost well and now raping the Grim Reaper decoration like wait, how the fuck am I raping this when it's not even Halloween? Who gives a flying dildo? It's a Drew Pickles video. Drew Pickles is not 100% sure if this is the right house, since the houses and yards look so much smaller to him now that he's an adult, plus some of them have been done over. However, it was one of the ones in the street, so for the purposes of this video it's this one bag that lost well. After that I will move on down towards the corner of Alderberry and Blueberry and there will be a house tucked away in the corner. Drew Pickles the Dark played with a kid here sometimes, when he was a little shitcorn, like 5 or 6 years old, and he didn't actually know if they were a boy or girl, since he couldn't tell and didn't know, until he found out her name was Janelle later on. It confused him, since she wore boys' clothes and liked throwing balls and such, but sounded like a girl, except with kind of a deep voice, but whatever, dwelling on a female is already disgusting me, so I will proceed to have sex with the trash barrel in the side of the road like actually Drew Pickles the Dark is not even 100% sure if the house here was her house, but he saw her come out of it once, so he's just assuming it was who the fuck gets turned in by garbage. I mean, of course I do, since everything turns me on, besides females. But there is also a Cube Muppet video, where he goes to the dump and gets horny from all the garbage. But as usual he still doesn't get satisfaction bag that lost well. After that I will shove the garbage barrel up my ass and go across the street. Across the street lived a really swell old lady who would give out drinks to the kids if they were thirsty, because this was the 90s and people weren't terrified of pedophiles or terrorists or whatever yet, and people were able to do nice things to kids without having to be worried about being called a pedophile. Thinking of pedis will piss me off and I will angrily begin to choke my chicken like seriously Drew Pickles the Dark is so fucking pissed off at pedophiles, not even counting the fact they are disgusting creeps. Just their presence makes it so you can't even say hi to kids anymore. Basically all you can do now is silently wait for like 3 seconds as you pass them, otherwise you risk some fucking Karen calling the cops. It's kind of hypocritical of me to say this, since I have actually fucked kids in some of my other go-to videos, but I'm not actually a pedophile. It's just collateral rapings. What a swell stress relief. I will continue walking down Blueberry Road, then reach the turn onto Bayberry Road, which I will proceed to go down next. Pretty soon I will reach the first house on the right, which was the former house of where a friend of Drew Pickles the Dark's mother used to live. Drew Pickles the Dark's mother would take him there when she visited her friend, and it probably would have been boring if she didn't have dogs he could play with there, so Drew Pickles the Dark would play with the dogs while he visited. Said friend moved out even before Drew Pickles the Dark moved, so obviously the house has new occupants, which I will proceed to fuck like holy shit, all of these houses look so much smaller than Drew Pickles the Dark remembers. But as he said before, he was a little shitcorn at the time, so everything seemed bigger. He never really thought about how big the house he lives in now is, until he saw these ones. The place he lives now is huge as fuck compared to these ones. The one he has now had 9 rooms of decent size, while these houses had either 5 or 6. And also instead of a small yard, his yard is almost 4 acres. He's not bragging, he's just trying to give context into how much your perception of things change as you grow up and experience new places. As it should go without saying, if any of the occupants are female, I will smack those bitches like smack 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 peg, that was swell. I will then proceed to continue down Bayberry Road, which there is no other particular stand-out houses. However, Drew Pickles the Dark will say that this was a really swell street that you made serious bank on during Halloween, both figuratively and literally, since at one of the houses a guy gave out money instead of candy for some reason. Anyway, once I reach the inn, I will take the right back onto Puritan Road. After only 5 seconds of traveling, I will reach the intersection of Puritan Road and Cranberry Road. Now, turning onto Cranberry will take you to the path where Drew Pickles the Dark lived, while continuing down Puritan Road will eventually lead to Head of the Bay, which is a really long road that leads to Warrington and Plymouth. However, there are still a few places I need to visit in that direction, so I will head there before swelliporting back to here. As I continue down Puritan Road, I will stop on the first house to the right, which is where Drew Pickles the Dark's aunt, another one, not the tomboy one, rented her first room after moving out. Drew Pickles the Dark doesn't actually know anything about the house besides that, so I will spread my ass cheeks in either side of the fence and begin to ride it back and forth, feeling all the parts of the fence brush against my asshole, and it will sound a little something like bag. That was swell. Across the street will be a swell Halloween house, since the guy in it gave absolutely massive amounts of candy. He would give an entire handful, which was quite swell. Or maybe that was the house to the right of it, Drew Pickles the Dark forgets, but regardless, the third house was also another swell Halloween house, as the guy who lived there would dress up as a witch for Halloween. The idea of a man putting on women's clothes is extremely gay, which will make me horny, so I will bust in and fuck the guy like Drew Pickles the Dark has no idea if this guy even lives here anymore, and he's pretty sure he had a wife too, so he was just dressing up for fun, since you could do that back in the day without being called a faggot, unless you were jerking off to it or something. That was swell. Turning back to the right side of the road and going back a little bit will be the childhood house of Drew Pickles the Dark's current stepfather, who was the brother of one of his mother's friends, which Drew Pickles the Dark didn't even find out until like 3 years after they were married, even though he knew both of them. But now I digress. There doesn't really appear to be anything swell I can do here, so I will just masturbate and cover the front porch with my cum like bag. That was swell. After that I will continue down Puritan Road, until I reach the intersection with Wall Street. No, not the Wall Street where all the American plutocrats operate out of, but just one that happens to share the same name. Anyway, I will head down Wall Street, until I reach Drew Pickles the Dark's second grandparents' house, although they weren't technically the grandparents of him, since his mother and the guy she was dating who they were parents of, kind of split up before getting married, but regardless both families stayed in touch. Because there isn't anything particularly stand out inside the house itself, I will head out back and proceed to take a dip in Bumps Pond, which according to Google Maps is actually called Queen Sewell Pond, which Drew Pickles the Dark had never heard, until he saw it on Google Maps, since everyone where he lived called it Bumps Pond. Even his mother, who lived here like 30 years at least, said she never heard it called Queen Sewell Pond. But regardless, I will rip off all of my clothes and proceed to skinny dip in the pond like and piss in the water, when I am taking a dip like actually their granddaughter is the first girl Drew Pickles the Dark ever slept with. But they were sharing a tent while camping and still young, so they didn't have sex or anything. But they got along a lot, and had she not moved halfway across the country, they honestly probably would have started dating. Yeah, there is an old town rumor that in the bottom of this pond there was a sunken ice cream truck from some guy who drove it in the ice in the winter and fell through. Drew Pickles the Dark asked his mother, and she said, when she was a kid, that rumor was around too, only back then they said it was a Jeep. But Drew Pickles the Dark could never figure out if that was true or not. Drew Pickles the Dark loved catching frogs at this pond when he was a kid. Spebag, that was swell. Pretty soon all of the fish and frogs and other such things will float to the top of the water, since my piss is like acid. So I will say I'm a fuck it and proceed to poop in the water like the geese and herons were in this pond. So it's probably full of shit anyway. Turning Queen Sewell Pond into Queer Sewer Pond. Bag, that was swell. Well, that was quite the sidetrack, so to get back on task I will swelleport back to the intersection of Puritan Road and Cranberry Road like swell. Drew Pickles the Dark forgot to say that, when he took the after-school bus, when he got detention, this was one of the two places he would get dropped off at, depending on which kids were on the bus, and so he has swell memories of walking down Cranberry Road, which I will be going down shortly. Why would the after-school bus and subsequent walk Drew Pickles the Dark only ever took when getting detention provide swell memories? Well, the after-school bus ride was amazing, since most of the time he got this cool nigga bus driver, and that's nigga with an A, not an ER, since he was super swell. Anyway, he let kids do shit like play music and trade cards and other shit banned from normal buses, and he would also play music on the bus that was inappropriate for kids by artists like Eminem and such that was considered cool. Although Drew Pickles the Dark doesn't like that genre of music really, but back then you pretended to like the cool shit, even if you didn't. Good thing Drew Pickles the Dark grew out of that amata. Oh, if I had been an after-school bus driver I would have put on a soundtrack consisting of YMCA, Jizz in My Pants, even though that song didn't exist back then, and other homosexually swell songs, but I digress. As stated, I will turn on to Cranberry Road. Cranberry Road didn't have any specific places Drew Pickles the Dark knew, but there was, however, a creepy-looking house at the top of the hill, although it looks a little less creepy in this picture. That or it seems less so, since he's older, but either way, I will notice the excessive amount of trash out front and proceed to have sex with the trash like and the sexy man sitting on the porch will say what the fuck are you doing? I will say oh nothing I am just making the trash more swell and he will say the only way you can make trash swell is by fucking it. And I will say no I can also masturbate and piss on it like swa 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 swa. And he will call me a sick fuck and I will say I'll show you the true definition of a sick fuck before raping him like it was quite convenient for Drew Pickles the Dark that this man was sitting on the front porch when the Google Street car drove by. So this works as a very slightly manager style scene. Drew Pickles the Dark has no fucking clue who this guy is. Bag, that was swell. After that I will reach the intersection of Cranberry Road and Cherry Street. Drew Pickles the Dark basically never went down Cherry Street as a kid, since he didn't know anyone who lived in it and it also led down to the public beach for Bumps Pond which he only used a couple times, since normally he just used the one in his second grandparents' property. That said, it sounds like it could be a swell place to go so I think I will head there. After turning onto and reaching the end of Cherry Street, I will reach the public beach for Bumps Pond, and even though it's empty in this picture, in this goes to video there is actually people hanging out here so I will rip off all of my clothes which I forgot to say magically reappeared in me after swelleporting a while back and I will run on the beach and all the people will become disgusted, as I skinny dip into the water once again. This time however, because it's a public beach and not a private one, some men will see me and go to beat the shit out of me. Seeing the hot muscular angry men will give me a massive boner and I will use my homosexual cat-like reflexes to dodge them and insert said boner into their asses like Actually there is a small path along the edge of the pond by the tree in the picture that Drew Pickles the Dark used to cut through to save time when he was going up to the Berry Roads which, now that he thinks about it, probably didn't actually save time since he was still going the same distance. But at the least it was the more scenic route. Bag, that was swell. Normally Drew Pickles the Dark would have me cut through the back path he mentioned. However, because there is no Google Street View of it, and I also need to visit the Blueberry-Cranberry intersection, I will head back up Cherry Street and then down Cranberry Road more to the aforementioned intersection. Wow, some things never change. This place looks exactly the same as it did 25 years ago, but Drew Pickles the Dark digresses. The intersection here was used as the high school bus stop, but since Drew Pickles the Dark moved away from Bourne before high school, he never had to wait here. Going forward, I could go down the hill to his bus stop and the park, then turn onto his street, but since this video is already taking too long, I'll continue down Blueberry Road and reach his house the other way and save all that stuff for the next video. One minor thing of note, one of the houses here had good candy on Halloween, specifically the one to the right off screen, but otherwise not much of note. So I will turn left and finish going down Blueberry Road. Although there is nothing particularly stand out for Drew Pickles the Dark, the Google Street View managed to capture a guy with no shirt on out front of his house, and I will become so horny from looking at the half-naked man and proceed to insert my boner into his ass and fuck him like Drew Pickles the Dark loves finding things like this with the Street View, kind of like his Isla Morda video, where he found that guy feeding a hare in a bag that lost well, and then I will reach the end of the street where it turns onto Pine Lane. Sometimes Drew Pickles the Dark would play here, which doesn't make sense considering there were other places that were better for that, but oh well, kids pick strange places to play. It should also be noted that the street always had sand at the end of it, and he would honestly not be surprised in the slightest if the sand in this picture is the same sand from 30 years ago, since the street was never swept or washed or whatever. But anyway, I will turn onto Pine Lane. After traveling down Pine Lane briefly, I will see Drew Pickles the Dark's house in the distance and proceed to get extremely aroused for no particular reason. Not wanting to let my boner go to waste, I will head in the house to the right and beat the shit out of Linda like smack. Drew Pickles the Dark doesn't even know if Linda still lives here. Smack. Actually, he feels a little bad typing this, since Linda was one of the only good next door neighbors. Smack. Since the other ones in either side were huge assholes. Smack. But nobody can be spared. Drew Pickles cock. Smack. Peg. That lost well. I will finish heading down the street and reach the Pine Lane Maple Street intersection, and take a short right to be right out front of Drew Pickles the Dark's childhood house. Upon reaching his childhood house, I will walk up to the front door and knock in the door. Whoever the current occupant is, who for the purposes of this video is a male, will answer the door and say hello. I will say, yes, do you know this is Drew Pickles the Dark's house? And to that he will ask, who the fuck is Drew Pickles the Dark? I will say, oh, well, about 20 years ago a kid lived here and he moved elsewhere. Then, when he was in his late teens, he watched a video called Drew Pickles Plays Action 52 for the NES in a brand new site called YouTube, and he thought the absurdist humor was funny, and that led him into the Speakonia video community, and eventually he started making them himself, and now after making well over 100 videos he is making a super long one, where I go to his hometown, so obviously I would need to visit his childhood house. The guy will stare at me with a confused and pissed off look and bluntly tell me to get the fuck out of his yard before he calls the cops, and I will say, wait a minute, are you not even curious what a Speakonia video is? The guy will say, if you promise to leave then I will listen. I will then come up with a lie and say sure I will leave after explaining. I will go on to explain that Speakonia videos are where the video creator sends myself or sometimes other characters to certain places and has us talk with text to speech, and usually in these videos we are really gay, but not in a normal way, in a satirical way that is the embodiment of all of the worst stereotypes about homosexuals, and that I, Drew Pickles, am the gayest man in the universe and rape all men I encounter in the videos. The guy will get a look of shock and fear in his face, realizing I am Drew Pickles, the gayest man in the world, and also that he is a man in a Speakonia video, and he will say he is calling the cops, but I will say there is no point, as I have raped more or less every police force in Earth, and then I will intercept him to the phone and fuck him like this yard actually underwent loads of landscaping since Drew Pickles the Dark moved out. The front door used to be on the side, and where it is now was a porch. This fucking tree is blocking the way, so I will get to a better position like okay, that's slightly better. Also, the front door walkway used to go straight, not turn into the driveway, and the driveway was widened a bit. Drew Pickles the Dark's mother's garden was on the other side of it. The house looks nicer here, since, as a kid, Drew Pickles the Dark's mother never bothered repainting it and stuff. And they also took out like a dozen trees too. Yes, Drew Pickles the Dark's mother liked the yard having lots of trees. They got rid of 4 apple trees, a maple tree, and also some other tree. Drew Pickles the Dark wasn't sure what it was. Bag that lost well. Well, this video has gotten quite long, but not as long as my cock, so I think it's time to take a break and I can visit other swell places next time. Of note will be the park, the house of the girl who Pickles the Dark had the hots for like all of school, that dumb bitch Jessica's house who a friend of Drew Pickles the Dark TP'd one mischief night, said friend's house, a couple other friends, as well as the new police station which I have a bone to pick with, and if that doesn't take too long I may potentially start visiting Main Street, but until then my sexy faggots. Hopefully this video was well and not getting too repetitive, and remember to keep your butt buddies close and your dildos closer.